I have very strict gun control policy. If there's a gun around, I want to be in control of it. Clint Eastwood. All right. Good morning. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, I want to especially thank you for giving me your time so early. Okay, there has been another school shooting and the gun debate rages on loudly as ever, passionately as ever. You might remember back in episode 266. That's right. Almost exactly 100 episodes ago. In that episode titled, It's Not the Guns, Never Was, I addressed various pro-gun control arguments. And I'm back for round two. Before I get into it, I do want to express condolences to the friends and family of those that are deceased, as well as my deepest sympathies to everyone affected. And it brings me no joy to have to do an episode like this. However, right as soon as the news broke, what happened? Anti-gun zealots, they leaped to come out and talk about, blast out all of their talking points. Okay, well, fine. So since that's how it's going to be, then we're doing this episode. So today, hopefully you walk away with your brain hurting because I have a lot of information here for you. So let's dive right in. In this first video, this is Kamala Harris. This is her initial response. She was speaking to a crowd and she gave a response. So let's just get into it and see what she says. All right. How about that?
So before I begin, I do want to say a few words about this tragic shooting that took place this morning in Winder, Georgia. We're still gathering information about what happened, but we know that there were multiple fatalities and injuries. And, our hearts are with all the students, the teachers, and their families, of course. And we are grateful to the first responders and the law enforcement that were on the scene. But this is just a senseless tragedy on top of so many senseless tragedies. And it's just outrageous that every day in our country, in the United States of America, that parents have to send their children to school worried about whether or not their child will come home alive.
Okay, so I want to address this real quick, and I apologize that the audio isn't any louder. She says parents have to send their children to school. What's not pointed out in this comment is that when we say parents have to send their kids, that's by law. The government requires children to attend schools. So let me pull up on the screen here a comment that I made yesterday, because I think you're going to find this rather instructive. So let me go ahead and let's see here. There we go. So here's this comment real quick. And here's what I said. Appalachia has about 1,900 students, all who are required to attend a school. Not that particular school necessarily, but they have to attend a school. The Supreme Court has ruled that police, government basically, only has a duty to protect those that they have in custody. America demand change, and that starts by protecting children at least equal to alleged criminals and convicted criminals in custody. So long as government requires children to gather in large numbers away from their families, it should be seen as nothing less than in government custody, and we should demand they be protected as such. People will ask, how many have to die before you support gun control? But instead I ask back, how many children have to die before you protect them before you demand that they are protected better than criminals. Now, I want you to think about that, folks. The Supreme Court has ruled it multiple times. We've seen this. They've said the police have no duty to protect you. However, if the police come to my house and they arrest me, then at that moment, they do have a duty to protect me. So let's say I did an awful crime. In fact, I'll give you one better. The so far, legally speaking, the alleged killer, what's his name? Colt something. The alleged killer in Appalachia is 14. He was arrested. He surrendered, and the police took him into custody. So if there's a parent whose child died, the police have a legal obligation to protect him, whereas they did not have a legal obligation to protect those kids. Now, most police, I believe that most police, if there was a school shooting, they would probably do something. Okay. So we're distinguishing between what they are legally required to do. And when you're legally required to do it, that means you can be held accountable when you don't, or if you fail. In the same way that when President Trump was shot, we were all like, what in the world? Somebody failed. Heads need to roll. Right? Same concept. That is their job. Their job is to protect the president, to make sure he does not get shot. And when he got shot, someone failed. Now, we can argue all the conspiracy theories some other day. Point being here, there was a legal obligation for which for which there was an investigation afterward. And we said, hey, what happened here? Where was the failure? But we don't do that with schools. And it's really sad that all these people out there, these white liberal moms, will sit there and whine and cry about all the gun control measures that they would like, but they never seem to say, hey, by the way, we should do by our children better than we do the people who might kill them. They don't talk about that. Why not? Why hasn't that come up on their radar? They say, hey, wait a minute, the police have to make sure that that some angry parent doesn't come after this guy. They have to protect him. But we don't even have anything in place that says you legally are required to protect children, but we'll funnel them all. We'll tell parents, hey, if you don't send your child to school, like a school, like you can homeschool them, you can go to a private school, you can go to a public school. Let's talk about public schools, because most kids go to a public school, right? If you don't send your kid to school, you could be in trouble. Your child is truant. You could be in trouble, and we've heard of people saying like, hey, parents should go to jail. So when Kamala Harris says parents have to, what she's not telling you that needs to be part of the conversation is they have to by force of law. We have to send our kids to a place where nobody is being charged with their custody and their safety. If a teacher jumps in front of a student to save them, that wasn't because they were required to. That wasn't because we explicitly laid it out and said, this needs to happen. You need to have the proper training to do so. And we're going to double check and make sure that you're the kind of person, you're the caliber of person that would do such a thing. No, that's by luck. And there have been teachers that have lost their lives in defense of children. And those are American heroes. But they did it because they chose to. And the children that they saved were lucky. It was pure luck that they happened to have a teacher that was willing to go that far. Okay, so let's continue on with her clip here. Let's hear what else she has to say. Maybe she can redeem herself.
Oh. We've got to stop it. And we have to end this epidemic of gun violence in our country once and for all. It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. So we will continue, of course, to send our prayers and our thoughts to the families and all those who were affected, including, I'm going off script right now, but listen, I mean, at the last year, I started a college tour.
So I want to point out here really quickly that she went off script, and I saw some people criticizing her. I'm not. You know what? Politicians need to go off script a little bit more often. They need to just literally speak from the heart. I'm kind of tired of these scripted, pleasant, tickle your ear type speeches. There's a place for those, but there's also a place for you just to speak off the cuff. And we need to recognize, hey, they're off the cuff right now. They're not going to sound as good. So, what is the content of what they're saying? To hell with how polished and smooth it is. It doesn't always have to be that way. I want to hear what they really believe, because half the time, probably more than that, more than half the time, I don't believe politicians anyway. So I just want to get that out.
And I traveled our country meeting with our young leaders, right? And so it was college age young leaders. So I did trade schools, colleges, universities, community colleges. By the way, I love Gen Z. I just love Gen Z. But I'll tell you, one of the things I asked every time I went to the auditorium, and it would be filled with these young leaders, students, and I'd ask them, raise your hand if at any point between kindergarten and 12th grade, you had to endure an active shooter drill. And for the young leaders who are here who are raising their hand, I'm telling you, every time the auditorium was packed and almost every hand went up. A lot of us, I'll speak about myself, we had, I grew up in California, earthquake drills, we had fire drills, but our kids are sitting in a classroom where they should be fulfilling their God-given potential, and some part of their big, beautiful brain is concerned about a shooter busting through the door of the classroom. It does not have to be this way.
I agree with her. It doesn't have to be this way. In fact, let's talk about this idea that, hey, she went on a college tour and she's asking them, she's like, hey, how many of you have been in active shooter drills? Well, to be honest with you, that's not an impressive, it might sound pretty like, oh my God, I can't believe it, all those kids. But I don't think people realize just how long that shooter drills have been around. So I did some digging, and here's what I found. New York Times, 2008. Here's what they wrote. In an era of school shootings, this was by Tina Kelly in March of 2008. Okay, almost a decade ago. She writes, Tim Matheny stalked the silent hallways of South Brunswick High School one recent Wednesday at 1:07 p.m., peering into dark, seemingly empty classrooms and jotting down room numbers whenever he heard giggles behind locked doors. Students were supposed to remain silent and out of sight. Mr. Matheny, the school's principal, was roaming the suburban campus as if he were an active shooter, a la Virginia Tech or Columbine, as part of a lockdown drill now required twice a year here and in many schools around the country. So this has been going on for almost a decade now, right? We're like since 2008. I'm sorry, can't do math. Longer than a decade. 2008, then you got 2018, now we're at 2024. Apologies for the math there. This is why you don't do math live on a live stream. Okay, so it's been over a decade. So of course, and I've got my notes right there too. 16 years that we've had these. Of course, she's going to go to a college and they're all going to say, "Yeah, I've been in an active shooter drill," and so and Google Trends backs this up. So let's take a look at this Google Trends here. So here we go. Let's see here. All right. So there we are. Google Trends here showing this. And you can see in this Google Trends here where active shooter drill is hardly mentioned. You see a little blip here, and that's around the 2008, 2009. And then you see it kind of skyrocketing all over the place. Now, these are just searches. So that's all that means. It doesn't necessarily mean that there was a shooting necessarily, although there might have been, right? And when there's a shooting, people start looking stuff up to try to find information because, well, when bad things happen, everybody wants to argue. So that plays a large role in it. Okay. Now, what's really interesting is not that we have these. It's whether or not we should actually have these. That's the real interesting part. So let's go over to Everytown. Are you guys familiar with Everytown? Everytown for gun safety. So this is an organization that they would love if they would love to have lots of gun control, right? These guys come out and they're like, gun control here, gun control there, gun control everywhere, gun control. You get a gun control, you get a gun control. You know, they're literally a meme in that sense. So here's what they had to say about shooter drills, active shooter drills. Reconsider active shooter drills. Wait a minute, what? 95% of American public schools drill students on lockdown procedures. Yet, there is almost no research affirming the value of these drills for preventing school shootings or protecting the school community when shootings do occur. No evidence. There's no research that confirms this. Now, it still might. It's possible that these kind of drills, in fact, do have some benefit, but there's no research on it. So here is the vice president running for president saying, hey, what about all these poor kids and the fact that they had to grow up an active shooter? This is sad. Well, it's sad because one, we funnel kids by force into large numbers, and then we do nothing to say, hey, they should be protected. We should probably put, a couple armed guys around, since we have so many grouped up. They literally are funneling children into an area like fish in a barrel. And then they're like, why'd these kids get shot? Well, you made them easy targets. And then on top of that, you force them to do things that may not have any value. And then you go and you complain about it and say, oh man, these kids, they're so emotionally distraught. They shouldn't have to live like this. You're right. They shouldn't. So maybe we should implement things that actually have data to support them. But for right now, we're just doing things. Let's get to a couple comments here before I lose sight of them. Let's see here. Time surfing alien. Never let a good tragedy go to waste. Every gun grabber ever. Yes, that is this shooting started at like 9:30 yesterday morning, something like that. 9:30, 10:30. I think 10:23 is when the first call came in. Okay, 10:23. And probably within an hour, you can go and you can dig up tweets where people were already just, hey, we got to use this to get some gun control. And people just throw out whatever. They just say whatever. We'll get to some of that. Let's see what else we got here in the comments. Brian Fleming, I mean, if we don't need protection, then the government should be sued for not protecting its citizenry, right? I think so. I mean, if the government's going to say you or your loved one has to be here, and then says, but no, we're not going to put in an armed guard to protect them, then when our children are harmed and it could have been prevented by having an armed guard there, then yes, they should be held accountable. Heads should roll in the same way they would in any other context where we're protecting somebody. I mean, if the police captured the young man yesterday and were on the way to take him to take him for arraignment and all that, and they didn't stop an angry dad from shooting the kid. Now the citizens would be like, yeah, that dad's a hero. But the law should say, hey, you failed to protect this guy because that was your job. And they would get in trouble for it. And they should, because that's their job. But they don't have that same obligation. Not for our kids. And I just think that's pretty sad. I think the grab lobby, I like that. The grab lobby needs to accept basic logic. Their side has problems with that. They really do, as we're going to see as we walk through some of this information. I'm going to flood you guys today. So let's see here. Oddsman says our side needs to get better at offense. We cannot trust the news media to report honestly, on the free Dexter Taylor case in New York, they won't. We know because they have not. Correct. They don't. They don't. They'll leave information out. They'll add information. I mean, like how many times? Who was it? It was Ann Coulter. The media is forcing me to basically paraphrase Ann Coulter. Like, go figure. But she made a point. I think she was on the Bill Maher show a while back, and she said basically, you know the color of the shooter's skin color by how quickly you learn information about them, and that's sad. The moment the media has information, they should divulge it. If it's a black shooter, then they should tell us the shooter was a black person. If it was a white person, the shooter was a white person. And at the end of the day, we should all despise them, not because they were white or black, but because they were a shooter, killing people. That's why. But they don't. They it's the sin of omission in many cases. And sometimes they're just outright manipulative. All right, let's continue on here. Let's see. Okay, so let's get back to where I was. So here's one of those people that leaped out there to say something. So let's pull this up. This is Mark Hamill. You might otherwise know him as Luke Skywalker, right? He says, tired of being the only country in the world with out of control gun violence on a regular basis. We won't get over it, as the former guy declared. We will vote blue down ballot to flip the House and expand the Senate. It's our only hope. Reform gun laws now. That's interesting. He didn't even wait for the blood to dry before he was like, we're going to vote down ballot. We're going to vote all these other candidates. Like that, like they don't even that doesn't matter, Mark. We shouldn't be talking about who we're going to vote for because of this shooting. We should be trying to figure out, hey, what the hell happened? How did this kid go from 13, 12, 13 years old, seemingly no problem, to a 14-year-old who's willing to go and slaughter his schoolmates? Something is seriously wrong when a 14-year-old goes out to kill people. We shouldn't be thinking about, man, gun control. Why don't we think about mental health, Mark, Luke? All right. So, but that does bring up an interesting point. And I can't show it to you on screen, so I'm just going to have to kind of read it to you. And the links are in the show notes. I was trying to figure out a way to kind of display it, and I wasn't able to come up with anything. But I did some research, and I found something very interesting. So the United States, if you look up, and again, it's in the show notes, if you look up the rate of gun ownership per 100 people, the United States is at the top of the list with 120 guns per 100 people. I think this is where now I would insert that meme, like, got to pump those numbers up. But for those people, this might make you feel a little bit better. The next country in terms of rates of guns per 100 people is the Falkland Islands. I would have never guessed this, with 62.1. So we're ahead of the pack by quite a bit. Okay. And then you can keep, it goes down from there. You've got Yemen is third, New Caledonia, that's fourth, Serbia is fifth, Montenegro, Canada, Uruguay. Canada really kind of threw me off. Uruguay, Cyprus, Finland, Lebanon, Iceland, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Austria, North Macedonia, Norway, Liechtenstein, Malta, Switzerland, New Zealand, Sweden, Pakistan. The list goes on down the line. So what I found was interesting from the same website, and I'm not going to try to parse out the years and all that. This is just the most current that they have on their site. The top 10 homicide rates. Well, by if you go by the homicide rate, number 1 is Jamaica. Number 2 is United States Virgin Islands, not United States, the Virgin Islands. Then St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Trinidad and Tobago, Lesotho. I didn't, you know what? I'm going to be honest. I didn't even know there was a country named Lesotho. St. Lucia, Honduras, South Africa, Bahamas, and St. Kitts and Nevis. Okay. So these are the countries with the top 10 homicide rates, top 10 sexual violence rates. Grenada, United Kingdom, number 2, Sweden, number 3, Iceland, number 4, Suriname, I've never heard of that one, Panama, New Zealand, Bermuda, Costa Rica, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Those are the top 10 for sexual violence. Sweden kind of threw me off. I wasn't expecting them to be in there, but they've got a rate of 215 per 100,000 people, with Grenada having 300. The United Kingdom, 274. Top 10 robbery rates in order: Costa Rica, Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil, Chile, Nicaragua, Ecuador, Cape Verde, South Africa, Mexico. Just want to point out something here. All these countries that I just named, the top 10 homicide rates, top 10 sexual violence rates, top 10 robbery rates, all but, let's see, I think 2, the Bahamas, and then New Zealand, and then, oh, I'm sorry, Uruguay. All the rest of them don't even make it in the top 40 countries for rates of guns per 100 people. How about that, Mark? How about that for some information? I got some more. We're not done. We've got a lot here. So I've got this book right here. Let me make sure I can see, I get it on the screen here. Oh, let's do this here real quick. How about we go, boom, there we go. So I've got this book, Intellectuals in Society by Thomas Sowell. If you're not a Thomas Sowell reader, become one. So I'm going to read a little passage here. I'm going to try to read the least amount as possible, because a lot of people, they like to point out and they like to say, oh yeah, well, Great Britain, they don't have a lot of gun violence. And people forget that they have a lot of robberies, especially robberies where people are actually at the house. So their robbery, if you look at the robbery rate for Great Britain, they have a higher rate of robbery while people are home than the United States. In the United States, most people case out the house and then they wait until the homeowner leaves. Why? Because they don't want to get shot, because we have so many guns. So let's take a look at some of this information and see, can we just look, because in fairness to the countries that I just listed, some of those are very third world countries, they're very small, so on and so forth. So you can have all kind of arguments about who you should compare, how you should compare, so on and so forth. But a lot of people they'll say, oh, Australia, they haven't had a mass shooting in forever, since like 1991, when they, took away all the guns. Well, let's read something here. So it has, for example, been repeated endlessly in the media and in academia that Britain and various other countries with stronger gun control laws than those in the United States have murder rates that are only a fraction of the murder rate in the United States. The clear implication being that it is the gun control which accounts for the difference in murder rates. Having reached this conclusion, most of the intelligentsia have seen no reason to proceed further. But a serious attempt to test the hypotheses of an inverse relationship between restricted gun ownership and the murder rate would make other comparisons and other breakdowns of statistical data necessary. For example, number 1, since we know that murder rates are lower in some countries with stronger gun control laws than in the United States, are there other countries with stronger gun control laws than the United States that have higher murder rates? Number 2, are there countries with widespread gun ownership which have lower murder rates than some other countries with lower gun ownership rates? Did the murder rate differential between the United States and Britain originate with the onset of gun control laws? Continuing on. Those who were content to stop when they found the kind of statistics they were looking for were unlikely to ask such questions. The answers to these 3 questions, incidentally, are yes, yes, and no. So let me read those questions. So the question is, since we know that murder rates are lower in some countries with stronger gun control laws than the United States, are there other countries with stronger gun control laws than the United States that have higher murder rates? The answer to that is yes. Are there countries with widespread gun ownership which have lower murder rates than some other countries with lower gun ownership rates? The answer to that one is yes. Did the murder rate differential between the United States and Britain originate with the onset of gun control laws? The answer to that is no. So let's continue on. Russia and Brazil have tougher gun control laws than the United States and much higher murder rates. Gun ownership rates in Mexico are a fraction of what they are in the United States, but Mexico's murder rate is more than double that in the United States. Handguns are banned in Luxembourg, but not in Belgium, France, or Germany. Yet the rate of Luxembourg is several times the murder rate in Belgium, France, or Germany. An international statistical study found that Switzerland, Israel, and New Zealand have relatively lax gun control laws and or high firearms availability, yet have homicide rates that differ little from those in England or Japan, which is to say, homicide rates a fraction of those in the United States. New York City has had murder rate some multiple of the murder rate in London for more than 2 centuries. And for most of those 2 centuries, neither place had serious gun control laws. Murders committed without guns have also been several times as high in New York as in London. Nevertheless, the fact that the murder rate in England is lower than the United States continues to be cited as proof that gun control laws reduce the murder rate. It is simply factually not true. Period. End of story. And the reason that it sounds true is because people go and they find the information that works for them, for their argument, and then they stop. They don't ask any counter questions. They don't say, okay, well, if this is the case, then that would mean this would also be the case, right? As he pointed out in his 3 questions. Now, I want to point out that's kind of, if that's hard to understand, or if you're trying to think of a way to express that to other people, think of it like this. Imagine that I took everybody that's watching right now at this very moment in time, and we compared all of our net worths. And then we said, oh, so and so has a higher net worth than this person. Whatever they do, they're more successful. They're just a more successful person. Well, what that doesn't account for is one, we're talking about a particular moment in time. Number two, we're not talking about like, when did these people get started, right? I'm 46. Maybe I didn't settle down and start working on my net worth until I was 40. That would give me 6 years. And maybe somebody else has been working for 10 years. Though that kind of information matters. So when people have these statistics and they want to come out and they say that, they just simply do the equivalent of saying, oh, you have more money in the bank. Whatever you're doing just must be more successful than this other person. But there could be a litany of reasons that have nothing to do with whether or not I am successful. Maybe I inherited a bunch of money. Maybe I got into an accident, I sued somebody, and I got a large settlement. Maybe I married wealthy, right? There's any number of maybes that have nothing to do with my success, my hard earned, my efforts. So start thinking of questions when people give you this data. But I'm telling you, if you read Thomas Sowell, he has done a lot of research and he will compare the same cities and countries at the current time, in past times, over time, and it's a really it's a really good way to look at the data overall and say, is what it's telling me really what this means? Because a lot of data can tell you anything at a particular moment in time. All right, so let's continue on because we're not done. So a lot of people will, speaking of data comparisons, let me pull up this Scientific American article. And this is titled, Guns Now Kill More Children and Young Adults Than Car Crashes. Well, that sounds kind of scary. I mean, car crashes are already bad, right? So let's take a look and see what Scientific American had to tell us. So here, and I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger so that we can see it up on the screen, but I'll have to zoom back out so we can see this chart because we're gonna look at this chart. It says guns now kill more children and young adults than car crashes. Firearms now exceed motor vehicle crashes as the leading cause of injury-related death for people ages 1 to 24. We're gonna get to that, don't you worry. A new analysis shows. So here's this chart, which is really what we want to focus on. All right, I'm going to kind of zoom out a little bit just so that we can see it. So it goes from 2004 to 2020. And so we can see here that motor vehicle crashes start way up high, and they've chopped off the data on the left, but that's okay. Starts up way up high, and you've got firearms that are way down here. And then as we go across time, we see that somewhere around 2017, these two intersect, right? So motor vehicle crashes have dropped tremendously. Firearms remained relatively stable, but then they started going up about 2017. And then about 2019 to 2020, they kind of make a sharp leap up. And from the moment from 2017, we can see that firearm related deaths were much higher than motor vehicle crashes. So that sounds kind of scary, right? Like, oh my God, like I can't believe that. Like, what's going on? Now, number one, we're not asking the obvious question, which is what has caused motor vehicle crashes to go down? Well, I don't know. And that's not really relevant to this particular episode. And maybe one day we'll explore that. All that we can worry about, for today's purpose, is that they went down. Good. That's a good thing. And we can see that firearms went up. That's not a good thing. Firearm deaths went up. That's not a good thing. But the real question is here, how is this data represented? What kind of things did they choose? Well, lucky for me, that Scientific American linked to where they got this data. They linked to something called Whiskers. It's from the CDC, which tracks all this information. You can go in there and you can make your selections and you can produce a graph similar to this. So I did that. Now, I do want to address this ages 1 to 24, okay? Because the title is a little misleading. It says guns now kill more children and young adults than car crashes. We're obviously going to focus on children. And a lot of people will point out that there are many news articles where they leave out the young adult part and they just say children. And then you look and usually it's from 0 to 19. Well, 18 and 19, while compared to me, they're children. Legally, they're adults. At the age of 18, you can sign up for the military and potentially be shipped off to another country where you can kill somebody. And I don't mean like just randomly kill them, but like, through the process of conflict. You can kill somebody with full legal permission, right? Like that can happen when you're 18. You can't do that when you're 17, right? And you can buy a home, you can buy a car, you can get yourself hundreds of thousands of student loan debts. You can do all kind of things when you're 18, right? And so we consider you to be a legal adult for pretty much everything. Drinking, and in some states, guns are off limits till you're 21. Then you become like the real adult, right? And then when you're 25, your car insurance starts going down. Then you become the extra real adult. But for all intents and purposes, you are a legal adult when you're 18, and you can do most everything that any legal adult can do. Okay. If we want to take it to a creepy place, when you're 18, you can sleep with somebody that's 60, and we'll all be grossed out and we'll say that's kind of creepy, but legally you can do that. You can't legally do that when you're 17 or 16. Okay. That causes a lot of problems. So, in other words, from the moment you turn 18, things change just like that for you, for the most part. So, we should not include that information while we're looking at the gun control problem, but it goes even more than that. So let's take a look at some of the data that I pulled up, because I think some of you are going to be amazed. I think you're going to be like, what the hell? So this is from Whiskers. So let's cut to it. All right. So what we're showing up on the screen here is this is deaths over time. Now, I did my best to make the selections that I thought that Scientific American made. And so this shows ages 1 to 20 or 0 to 24. It says it's from 2018 to 2021, but they clearly have it from 2001 to 2021. And we can see that right about 2017, the lines intersect. So we're pretty close, okay, to replicating that data. So I'm not going to argue with Scientific American and say, hey, you didn't, I can't reproduce that. No, I'm able to pretty closely reproduce it. So now it gets more interesting though, because like I said, 1 to 24, why are we doing that? Why would we say children? And then, and we started with a lot of news outlets and a lot of reporting saying, up till 19. Now we're starting to include up to 24. Okay. Well, that gets a little interesting as we go along. So let's take a look at the next one. All right. So the next one here, this is 1 to 17. So it's a little different. Okay. You can see that it's a wee bit different. The lines don't intersect until about 2020 instead of at 2017. So we still have the drop in car-related crashes, and we still have a slight upturn when it comes to the firearm deaths. And that's represented by the orange, just for the record. Okay. But this is again from up to 17 years old. So then we move on to the next slide here. All right. And again, we can see that now they're separated. Like, wait, what? And I did ages 1 to 14. And the reason I did that is because what I wanted to know is, are there differences in these rates when we start breaking down the data that might be useful? Because again, if we want to do something, we should be doing something based on what the data actually tells us. We should make sure that whatever it is that we're doing is going to work. And the only way that you can know whether it's going to work is whether or not the data supports what you're trying to do. So now we can see that there's a huge gap. Like, the firearm deaths aren't the number one killer for ages 1 to 14. There's a nice little gap there. And it's car rates still went down, right? And they kind of leveled off a little bit there from, I don't know, I'm trying to read that from like about 2017 or so. But now there's a gap. So now for your kids 1 to 14, you might concern yourself more with car crashes, because it would appear, based on the two slides that we just looked at, from up to 17 and up to 14, that there might be a bigger problem in high school. Because at high school, typically you start at about age 15. In fact, if you from my understanding of schools, you have elementary, which is K to 5. Then you have junior high, which is 6, 7, and 8. Then you have high school, which is 9 to 12. So let's continue on looking, because this gets more interesting. Okay. So now this is 15 to 18. I probably should have done 17, but I did 18 just because I know, I'm trying to capture high school. And I know that sometimes, like, generally you have a lot of 18-year-olds in high school. Sometimes you have 19-year-olds. I guess I could have included that. But we can see that we're now back to intersecting again. And we're intersecting at a different time than we had with, it's actually about a year earlier. So if you remember, the first chart, or the chart from Scientific American, had things they had it intersecting at about 2017. And so we can see this is actually intersecting earlier for high school age. It's an interesting point. We're going to talk about what this means in a minute. All right, so we go on to the next one here. So this is 19 to 24. Wow, look at that. We shot up. 19 to 24, all intent firearms. So this is any firearm death, whatever the intent. And they shoot up dramatically for ages 19 to 24. That's pretty wild. Like, what's going on here? And you see how close it is to auto deaths, like motor vehicle deaths of any cause, again. So it could be a pedestrian getting run over, could be a car accident, whatever the case, right? And we're intersecting now. Let's see here. Let me zoom in a little bit. We're intersecting now at about 2015. So we're intersecting a little bit earlier. It really appears that the problem is around the high school and just after graduation age. So let's go to our next slide here. Number 6. So this is 1 to 11. Now, why did I choose this? This is basically elementary age. I was curious because my son is in kindergarten. He goes to a charter school. It's basically a public school, it's a nicer public school, but it's a public school basically. So 1 to 11, because I was curious. I was like, how much worry do I have with my son right now based on the data? And this is the biggest gap that we see. And we can see that throughout time, for 20 years, auto deaths for those aged 1 to 11 far outnumber firearm deaths. And we see something else that's interesting. The firearm deaths, they remain a little bit more steady. We don't see the spike that we saw, in current years that we saw with other ages. So, what does this all mean? This means we cannot and should not be trying to craft ideas to address gun violence based on 0 to 24 years. We need to break down the data further because when they're in high school, the risk of death is higher. In fact, it's higher than motor related deaths. But that's not the same for up to 14. And the gap is even larger for up to 11. So if you have a child that's 14 years or younger, your concern about them being shot at a school should be a bit less than if you have a high school student. And there are other factors, right? Like these aren't the only factors. Are you going to a much nicer school? Are you going to a private school? So on and so forth, right? Are you homeschooled? If your kid's homeschooled, they practically like their chance of being shot up is pretty low. It's never zero. You could have a disgruntled family member. So it's possible, but the likelihood gets a lot lower. So this is the kind of information that we need to be looking at and evaluating. All right, one last on this particular topic, one last one. So I went to Grok and I was just curious because you always hear about gang violence when we talk about guns. It says provide me gang member age demographics. Well, here's what Grok told me. It's up on the screen so you can read it. Based on the information available up to 2024, here's a general overview of gang member age demographics. Youth gangs, typically youth gangs, which are the focus of many studies, show a significant proportion of members starting their involvement in their mid-teens. Age distribution. Under 15, around 16% of all gang members might fall into this category, indicating that gang involvement can start very early. That is a problem, right? If you're under 15, like nobody should be in a gang, but if you're under 15, you should be playing like PlayStation and stuff. Okay, for sure. 15 to 17. This age group constitutes about 34% of gang members, highlighting the peak of juvenile involvement. 18 to 24, a substantial portion, around 37%, suggesting that while many start as juveniles, a significant number continue or join as young adults. And then over 24, roughly 13% of gang members. So if you're doing the math, between the ages of 15 and 24, 71%, that accounts for 71% of gang members in the United States. That might have something to do with violence, maybe. Now, a lot of these mass shooters were not in gangs. So then we have to look at other things like mental health. That's definitely a part of it. And I don't have the data on mental health in this particular episode, but I'm just pointing out here that in the gun control debate, many people make the same mistakes that they make when like during COVID. During COVID, I did not take the vaccine. Why did I not take it? I didn't take it because I was like, oh, big pharma, oh, this is rust, or oh man, Biden, he's trying to force, some experimental drug. That's not why I took it. I didn't take it. Why I didn't take it is because I looked at the data and I said, wow, this data tells me that if you're old, if you have certain comorbidities, so that would be things like being overweight, diabetes, high blood pressure. If you have these, if you fall into one of those categories, you are at a much higher risk for contracting COVID and then being hospitalized because of it. Those factors, well, they don't apply to me. So I was like, I'm 46, so that's not old. My son might think so, but that's not old, right? And I don't have any of those diseases. I don't have any actually. So in terms of statistics, I looked at it and I said, wow, the rates of people that are contracting it and more importantly, being hospitalized because of it are very low for people like me. So therefore, I didn't take it. And then I argued and I said, we need to focus on who is at most risk and stop trying to spread the love to everyone. That was the big problem. If you want to point the finger at just one failing during COVID, I would argue that failing was that we tried to apply to everyone what did not apply to everyone. We had the same problem during the AIDS crisis. People don't like to talk about it because they get deemed homophobic. But the same problem. If you were an intravenous drug user, or you were a man who slept with other men, gay man, then you were at highest risk of contracting AIDS. Now, that doesn't mean that nobody else was at risk. That just means that your risk, if you fell into one of those two categories, was substantially higher. Now, people say, well, we don't want people to think it's a gay disease. Fine. Then tell them that lesbians had a low risk. We're not going to get into the, there's reasons why. Try to keep this family friendly, but I'm sure you can figure it out. Okay. But lesbians had a very low risk. They had a low rate, as did even spouses that were cheating on their spouses, like cheating heterosexually. But if you were a man sleeping with another man, well, now your risk went up, even though you might be married to a woman. This is the kind of information that we need to solve real problems. And this is the information we're not getting because people just want to lump it in and say, oh, well, up to 24 years old, look how bad it is. It's worse than car crashes, you know? And so they try to fool us. And that is a disservice to everyone. And that just shows that people care more about just taking guns than actually doing something that would work, whatever that something is. There's a lot of inconsistent calls too by gun grabbers. Let me show you something else. I thought this was kind of interesting, and there's not a lot of data behind it, but I just wanted to show it to you because I thought it was quite interesting. So here's some account named Spitfire. I don't know who this is. She said, "I don't remember Democrats calling for gun control and red flag laws after Trump was shot. Did I miss that?" So I was curious. I was like, did that happen? And how do we verify that? Well, turns out the New York Times did the work for me. So here's an article that they wrote. So this article was written in 2024, so earlier this year. Few lawmakers called for tougher gun laws after Trump shooting. Unlike after many mass shootings, there has been no concerted outcry from elected officials to implement stricter gun safety measures. Now, the other day I showed the New York Times and somebody criticized. They're like, "Hey, man, New York Times is not reputable." Well, that's fine. They don't necessarily have to be reputable, in my opinion. They are very popular, and a lot of people do rely on it. And to be truthful, there's a lot of information that we can gain from reading the New York Times. In this particular case, since we know that the New York Times is more liberal, we can kind of bank on the fact that this article that didn't receive a lot of pushback and people weren't like, hey, this person wrote this article in the New York Times and that's totally not true. There's no argument. Nobody made an argument about that because it's true. And it doesn't come from a right-wing source that you could just brush off and say, well, of course they would say that. No, this comes, I don't know if the writer herself is liberal, but it comes from not a magazine, but a newspaper that tilts more left. So therefore, in this particular case, I'm going to say this is evidence to back up what Spitfire on social media said. People are the gun grabbers aren't even consistent. I mean, they were it was barely what, a few hours before they were calling for all kind of gun control measures. Barely a few hours. President gets shot, and days, weeks go by. You don't hear the same level because it doesn't fit their agenda for whatever reason. I don't know. They don't like Trump. They wanted him to die. I don't really know. I'm not gonna speculate as to why they didn't, but the fact is they didn't. Let's see. Let's see if we can get to a few more comments in here. I'm trying to keep up with them, folks. Let's see. I do not see a link to X. I'll try to look it up here in just a moment. That Liberty lady, she had said earlier that somebody was going off the rails. Prefer your gun unloaded and locked in a safe, so on and so forth. I don't see a particular post. It says links, but I don't see that X links or so and so. Let's see here. What else do we got? Let's see here. Oh, yes. especially since this person was ID'd by the FBI to be a violent person and have fantasies of school shootings. FBI is a complete waste. What does that mean? Well, let's pull that up real quick because I think that's very instructive here. So, let's see. And I don't have that one queued up, but I can find it quick, fast, and in a hurry. So give me just a moment here because I do have it saved. So let's go to, let's see here. We want to go to my bookmarks and we're going to go to my bookmarks and we're going to find, here it is. This is from FBI Atlanta. And I'll put it up on the screen here in just a moment so that everybody else can see what the FBI in Atlanta was up to or what they had to say. There you go. All right. So FBI Atlanta, they put out a statement yesterday, last night. And let's see here. Trying to give me a second. Let's do it this way so I can actually read it. Open open image in new tab. There we go. All right, so we're gonna go here. I think that will work. Might have to zoom back out a little bit and make sure that everybody else can read it. Oh no, let's change it to this. Give me just a second, folks. We will get this taken care of. There you go. Now you guys can read along. Read along with me. FBI Atlanta responded earlier today to Appalachia High School following reports of an active shooter. Throughout the day, FBI personnel have been coordinating with and supporting local and state law enforcement. The FBI will dedicate all available resources as requested to seek justice and bring closure for the victims and their families. In May of 2023, the FBI's National Threat Operations Center received several anonymous tips about online threats to commit a school shooting at an unidentified location and time. The online threats contained photographs of guns. Within 24 hours, the FBI determined the online post originated in Georgia, and the FBI's Atlanta field office referred the information to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office for action. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office located a possible subject, a 13-year-old male, and interviewed him and his father. The father stated he had hunting guns in the house, but the subject did not have unsupervised access to them. The subject denied making the threats online. Jackson County alerted local schools for continued monitoring of the subject. And then it goes on to say, I gotta move, uh, give me a second so I can see what else it's, goodness, give me there. They say at that time, there was no probable cause for arrest or to take any additional law enforcement action on the local, state, or federal level. All right. So the FBI knew about it. Like, didn't we talk about this the other day? Like, there's literally a meme, and it happens so often. That's why there's a meme. Happens so often. And it's like that Bart Simpson. It's like, yes, we had him on our radar. So people want more gun laws, and they never stop to ask and say, how come the ones we have aren't working? And if those don't work to prevent these things, what guarantee do we have that these new ones that we want to implement will? They don't ask those questions. They just assume it will, right? Oh, take all the guns away and therefore nobody will get shot anymore. Like I can't think of a more privileged, asinine way to think. Oh, we'll just take them all and everything will be fine. Right? You mean like everything's fine now with all the laws we have in place? Why aren't those working? And if they don't work, tell me, what evidence do you have that your new ones will? You just suddenly, like, according to the data that I've reviewed, you're not even looking at the right information. You don't even know who to target. And when I say who to target, I mean, like, what demographic? Because you're busy saying, well, 0 to 19 or 0 to 24. Look, oh my God, more firearm deaths than there were motor deaths. Okay, well, great. Now that we know that, now what? Well, we're going to treat the high schoolers who have a much more, who we should be much more concerned about. We're going to treat them the same as we're going to treat the elementary school students, who we should be less concerned about. Not zero concern, just less. We need to learn to prioritize our efforts. Otherwise, we are wasting our time and we will just simply repeat the same problems over and over again in various situations. AIDS, people die. COVID, people die. Guns, people die. And one of the reasons is because of all the things that government tries to do, none of them seem to work because they're not even based on actual proper data. It's just people throwing stuff at the wall, hoping that it sticks, and then saying, well, that didn't stick because we need more. We need more. No, you need to get your head out of your ass and you need to figure out what it is that didn't work, why it didn't work, and how that reflects on your new ideas. No new ideas until you figure out the old ones. And if you can't figure out the old ones, exit the conversation. You don't belong. That's the conversation. And yes, we need to have a brutal conversation, not mean spirited. You don't need to go cuss people out, but we need to have a brutal conversation with people. Why? Children are dying. That's why they're dying. And we got these half assed ideas that people can't prove will work. Even Everytown has said the active shooter drills that everybody's crying about that kids have to endure, there's no evidence to support they even work. Yet we're doing it. And then we're complaining, not we, but some people are complaining. Well, look at the trauma these kids have to go through for doing this. Well, okay, good. Stop making them do it. Go find data to support the ideas first. We do not and should not, we do actually, we should not implement ideas before we know they're going to work. And the moment we realize they don't work, we should remove them. Stop doing them. But we don't, because just do something, right? That's the call. That's the mantra. Just do something. All right. I know I'm going over today, folks, but there's a lot of information here and I got a little bit more. So if you can bear with me a little bit longer, I'm going to show you something else here. This is interesting because a lot of people will like to say, well, if we take all the guns away, well, then we won't have any mass shootings. And to an extent there may be some truth to that. Like literally, if nobody has a gun, how do you shoot somebody, right? You would have fewer. It would be harder. So in a sense, there's a certain level of accuracy there. But that doesn't address the real problem, because the real problem is that one person is willing to do harm to another person. So enter mass stabbings. Do you ever hear about mass stabbings? No, you don't. Why? Because it's just not popular to talk about. Because if we talked about it more, people might start questioning whether or not all the gun control laws will be all that good. Because we'd still have people getting killed, and we would have people who are defenseless. So let's take a look at what Wikipedia, and I know it's Wikipedia. I'm so sorry. But again, they laid it out so nice and neat. You can go and you can look up all the links to find the stories. And that will be sufficient enough. All right. So here, I just want you to look at the left side, actually. The left side shows 2020, 2021, 22, 23, 24. So I'm just going to very quick, I'm not going to go through them all. We're not going to go through any of them. I just kind of want to show you what we're kind of looking at here. So we drop down 2021. Look at all this. It's a good handful. 2020, 21. I'm sorry. 2020, then now 2021. Got a good handful. Now these are all over the world. 2022, whole bunch there. Israel, Iran, United Kingdom, Las Vegas, Nevada. 2023, whole bunch here. 2024, another whole bunch all over. Indianapolis, Charlotte, Honolulu, Rio Bueno, Rizal, China, all over the place. So how about some information on that? So I kind of did the math a little bit. In 2024, there were 19 incidents that accounted for 57 deaths and over 96 injuries. Altogether, between 2020 and 2024, there were 64 incidents. Now, I didn't tabulate how many deaths and injuries. People are still violent. We're not addressing the fact that people are killing people. When are we going to address that? Because if we address the fact that somebody wants to do harm to another person, then maybe we can minimize the amount of gun violence. If you stop the gang members from shooting each other, what happens? Gun violence goes down. And when I say stop them, like take away their reason, figure out what it is about their situation that leads them to say, I should shoot another person. When it comes to kids and other people going and committing mass shootings at schools and other places, what is it that's causing them to want to harm somebody else? Because as I just showed you, if you take away their guns, they could still go grab a knife. And some of those, like if you look into the details of some of those, Some of them were in the tens of people being stabbed. So we're not talking like a whole bunch of onesies. Some of them were like 4, 5, 6, 8, 10. I think there was one that was like 21 people were injured and like 6 people were killed or something like that in a stabbing. This happens. It's under the term mass stabbings. People are trying to kill other people. They have a problem. That is what we need to figure out how to address. Let's see. What else do I got here? I'm getting close to done. I promise. Promise I am. Speaking about gun deaths and violence and numbers and all this stuff, one thing that gets missed is that a large percentage of gun deaths in America are suicides. In fact, let's pull up some information because I want to make sure that if you're watching this show, you're armed with facts so that you can talk to your friends and family factually. So let's take a look. Here is from the Pew Research Center. What the data says about gun deaths in the US. Zoom in a little bit. More Americans died of gun-related injuries in 2021 than any other year on record, according to the latest available statistics from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Okay, we'll go on down. And how many people die from gun-related injuries in the U.S. each year? 2021, the most recent year for which complete data is available, 48,830 people died from gun-related injuries in the U.S., according to the CDC. That figure includes gun murders and gun suicides, along with the 3 less common types of gun-related deaths tracked by the CDC, those that were accidental, those that involved law enforcement, and those whose circumstances could not be determined. Maybe an accident or no, that was our accident. So let's go down here. Look at this chart. Suicides account for more than half of U.S. gun deaths in 2021. More than half. 54%. 43% were murder, but 54% were suicide. So if we just address why people want to kill themselves, not how they're going to kill themselves, because in the process of dealing with how they might kill themselves, you basically limit other people from having firearms, which basically means you limit their right of self-defense. So 54%. But nobody wants to have that conversation and say, what is it about these people that they say, I'm going to kill myself, and in a particularly gruesome fashion? Taking pills seems to me, I'm not suicidal, but taking pills seems to me a little bit less gruesome, a little bit more tolerable, right? But a gun, that's a little bit more immediate, a little bit more guaranteed. So maybe that's why they choose it. I don't really know. But that's what we should be addressing. Now, if you don't believe me, if you say, dude, it's the Pew Research. Enter Newtown, or Everytown. I keep saying Newtown. Everytown for gun safety. Remember our good friends that want lots of gun control laws? Well, here's what they said on gun suicide. Gun suicide claims the lives of more than 25,000 people in the U.S. every year. We must address this public health crisis to reduce gun violence in this country. I don't disagree with anything that I just read. Here's what it goes on to say. Though gun violence conversations tend to focus on homicides, nearly 6 out of every 10 gun deaths in the U.S. are suicides. That's an average of 69 deaths a day. These deaths can be prevented. They can be if we focus on an actual root cause, which we are not. We are focusing on the manner in which they do it. So let's continue on, because I've got just a little bit more information, then we can wrap up this show, and hopefully you will have all the information that you need to go out there and show people that gun control is not the answer. All right, so we've got this video. Let me pull up this other video. So this is Kamala Harris, and I believe it's from 2019, and she's talking about what she would do if she was elected. So let's take a look.
Well, we're waiting for Congress to have the courage to act. And so let me tell you what I'm proposing. I'm proposing, one, that if by my 100th day in office, when elected president of the United States, the United States Congress fails to put a bill on my desk to sign with all of the good ideas or any of the good ideas.
Okay, so that's very interesting. All of the good ideas or any of the good. So first and foremost, who decides what's a good idea? Her? If Congress comes to her and says, here's what we got to do, and she says, nope, those aren't good ideas. I mean, is that her decision to make? Who decides? And then it really sounds like she just wants anything, because she's like, well, all the good ideas or any of them, give me something. And this is the problem that we have in this country. We got to do something. And as long as we do something, everybody feels complacent. They feel happy, and then they get complacent. And then we have another shooting. And then everybody's like, man, why did, well, because whatever we did in the past, whatever laws that we have on the books, they're not working. And when they're not working, you can't just go throw more laws on the books. You need to figure out what it is about the laws that make them not working, right? Especially in large numbers. I mean, murder is illegal, and you'll always have somebody who wants to kill another person. But when you have somebody that wants to go and kill a bunch of children, that's an entirely different ballgame. That is something way different. And that requires more than a simple law. That requires figuring out what it is that we can do to intervene before the person wants to kill somebody. Because just taking the gun only means they got to maybe go find a knife or a sword or whatever. Let's continue on. Let's see what else she has to say.
I'm prepared to take executive action because that's what's needed.
Okay, so I'm not going to get into it, but far too many presidents, I think pretty much all of them, get into this, I got to take executive action. If you don't do it, I will. America, we need to stop that. That is just, that's not helping. Nobody's looked back and be like, man, I'm glad they made that executive order. Ooh, turns out life is so much better now. Look at all these things that aren't happening, or these things that are happening. No, we just later say, oh, well, we need to renew it. We need more laws. We need this. We need more this. We need more funding. There's always something that's not enough. So clearly these ideas suck. And it's not really what the executive branch, the president, should be doing in the first place. Let's continue on.
Action.
To do what?
To do specifically for anyone who sells more than 5 guns a year, they will be required to perform background checks on the people they sell them to. And this will be the most comprehensive background check policy that has ever been had in our country thus far.
Okay, so she just likes saying it. She's like, this is the most comprehensive that's ever happened before. Like, that sounds amazing, right? Like, wow, like for the people that are gun grabbers. That sounds amazing. Like, oh, wow, most comprehensive ever. That's the best. We love hearing the first ever, the biggest ever. We love hearing that. That sounds great. But that doesn't mean that it is. It just sounds great. And if we're doing our shoddy research like we've been doing, then that's all it's going to do is sound great.
Not be done by executive order?
Yes. Yes, it can. I am also prepared to say and to direct the ATF to remove and take away the licenses of gun dealers who fail to follow the law. And Jake, 90% of the guns that are associated with crime have been sold by 5% of the gun dealers. We need to take their licenses away.
Huh. Sounds like she just wants to take licenses away. Right? Like, oh, these dealers, they account for the largest share of them. Okay. And so what? Like, do we do that with do we do that with car dealers? Do we say, man, these car dealers, they account for, like, and I'm just going to make stuff up, Toyota dealerships account for, 90% of all the cars that are involved in auto accidents. We need to take their license. We don't say that in any other context, right? Or when a car is used in a crime, we don't, it's not how we operate. We only want to do that with guns. Why? Because, well, America, we're fat and lazy. That's the truth. The fat has little to do with it, but it just kind of goes with it. But we're basically fat and lazy. We're busy stuffing our face, getting on the internet, running our mouths, but we're not busy educating ourselves and evaluating arguments and really looking for solutions that will actually provide results. We're not doing that. She wants background checks. Every single time there's a shooting, same thing happens. People come out and say, well, we need background checks. We need this. We need this. And then when you look at it, you'll realize that none of those laws would have stopped the shooting. In this particular case, a background check wouldn't have stopped it. They already checked into him. when he was 13, right? There was a threat. Hey, are you threatening? Oh, I'm just kidding. I was just joking. Like, they should tell him, like, hey, these jokes are serious, right? We don't play like that. But then they look into it and they find out that, hey, the dad, presumably, because there's no evidence otherwise, presumably the dad was a legitimate owner. He bought it earnestly. Did he get a background check? I don't know. Was there anything in his background that would have flagged it? Probably not. His son was 13. He wasn't going to get a background check. Gun wasn't in his name. The kid grows up, figures out a way to get the gun. Oh, his dad said, hey, look, he doesn't have unsupervised access to these guns. And somehow he got to them, because that's what 14-year-olds do. They get into things. They do stuff. 5-year-olds do that, right? So there's no law that would have stopped that. There's nothing. There's no law. The only law that you could create is to say that you could create red flag laws, and you could say, anytime somebody makes a complaint, we're just taking all your guns, which people have suggested. And what you're going to do is, in that process, you might capture a few people that are would-be killers. You won't know it, because since they don't kill anybody, you won't be able to say, haha, we prevented this guy from killing people. He was about to. And, well, we can't say he was about to because we have no evidence. We took his guns and he didn't. Right? So there's no way you could prove that he was going to. But what you can prove is that you made more people defenseless. So when somebody comes after them with a knife or a gun, right? Somebody that wasn't flagged, and they come after somebody with a gun, well, that person might be unarmed now because of red flag laws or whatever other law that they come up with. So at the end of the day, this is all reactive, and it doesn't really address the real problem, which, in my opinion, is mental illness. And I think somebody mentioned that here in the comments. Let's see. Let's see here. Where is it? I know I saw it here. Yes, here it is. This is a good comment. It's a sad comment, but it's a good one from Apple Miss. I think that's how you say it. Instead of encouraging our kids to engage in activities good for mental health, like outdoor exercise, but if the kids complain, then maybe they get a pill, and nobody cares until there's harm. This is absolutely true. This actually happens. In my episode where I was defending Chase, I pointed out the data on SSRI use and on ADHD medication use. And I expressed my own experience, very negative experience with SSRIs that gave me weird, crazy thoughts that I won't tell anybody. I haven't had them since, didn't have them before, but I sure as hell had them while I was on that medication. And it was sure as hell scary. Right. And we do this. We just, oh, you need a pill. You're feeling depressed? Rather than saying, hey, why don't we get you involved in some activities that will physically stimulate you, that will connect you with other people? I heard a statistic a long time ago. I don't know if it's true, and I'm thinking on the fly here, and then I'm going to wrap it up. But I had heard that mental health issues are extremely low in the Amish community. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it seems like it would be true, because they have a community of people, they eat well, and they're active. They're busy. Like, they'll go and put up a barn in like a day, and then they go put up another one, right? And they go out in the fields and they work. And I'm not suggesting that you necessarily have to work out in the field. But what I am saying is that there is truth to this idea that we need to be more active, and we need to eat better, and we need to be more mindful about the pharmaceuticals that we take. And I believe those things are probably our first line of defense, not only for people that would go and kill a bunch of children, but also for people who would commit suicide. And if you can tackle and make a huge dent into both of those, suicide and mass killings, then we have done something good for the world. And I don't think that you actually have to resort to more laws and limitations upon law-abiding citizens who are not in danger of killing themselves or other people out of malice. That is our answer. So hopefully all this information, and I know it was a lot, hopefully you found it useful. But I got to close and get out of here. So folks, thank you for watching. Hope you found this episode informative, maybe even a little inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Be sure that you are subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you're there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. Last but not least, I want you to remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.